All right, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, my guest is Emily Jansen. Emily, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Of course, it's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Would you mind just sharing your story with the audience?
Sure. So thanks again for hosting me on the Path of Purpose. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Emily Jansen, and I am an author, a full-time marketing consultant, and also a branding expert. I guess my story is that I grew up in Washington, D.C., lived there, worked there for a number of years, got my undergrad there, my master's at Johns Hopkins, spent a couple years living overseas in different places, both Kenya and Korea, and then transitioned to Austin, Texas about 4 years ago during COVID. I was one of the, the transplants of the complexities, and then I ended up staying here where I've built my business and been able to launch my book and have really established my life.
Awesome. That was very concise. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that gives a really clear idea of like the different aspects of your life. So what brought you to or I should say like what inspired you to like leave the country at a young age to go explore?
Yeah, I had a really interesting journey as a child of reading books about people who were missionaries and also individuals who had worked in the Peace Corps. My grandmother lived in Nigeria in the 60s. My dad's parents were immigrants from Holland. And I really always had a passion for just seeing the world and looking through the lens of other cultures and countries and understanding what it really meant to be a global citizen. And so when I was 24, I guess I was just itching for excitement and adventure. I told my parents I'm moving to Kenya. I had done some volunteer trips to Mexico and Uganda previously, but I had never like fully owned that I want to live overseas. So I applied for a position at a boarding school and was accepted and raised $20,000 in 5 months and packed my bags and gave a tearful goodbye to my family. And I moved to Kenya in 2009. That year was amazing. It was transformative. I really feel like one thing I learned that year was we don't go to other countries to change people. We really go there to be changed. And that was a key distinction. I think as a 20 something, you want to change the world and make an impact on the world. And we all say that. But then we go and we walk a mile in other people's shoes and we realize actually they're changing me. And so that kind of sparked in me a deeper desire to live overseas, to pursue opportunities abroad, and to really find myself as just one member of a big community.
In what ways do you feel that by living in Kenya changed you?
You know, I like the phrase, they say in Kenya that, that basically time is relationships. And it always stuck with me because I think in a Western mindset, we think of time as a currency. Like, time is the only currency you can't measure and you can't really predict. And yet time is relationships. And so in Kenya, I really learned the value of not overscheduling. And I know that sounds really funny, but in Kenya, we would get into the truck to drive to Nairobi and people would say, "Oh, what are you doing today?" And, here in Austin, it would be, I'm going to go work out. I'm going to have coffee with a friend. Then I'm going to go to this meeting. Then I'm going to go to this lunch. And there's so many things we try to fit into one day. And in Kenya, it's like, we're going to go grocery shopping in Nairobi. And that was the task of the day, or that was the activity of the day. And so I think it's just been an interesting journey for me of always trying to balance how to really find quality time for relationships while also getting things done.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And I really empathize too with like how in the US it feels like it's like go, 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 do this, do that now. Like what are you doing like this hour of the day? What are you doing next? And
Right.
I I feel like there's a lot of uh we can get stuck in that. What so let me ask you this then. So what learning that and then coming back to the United States, what was that like in the next chapter of your life after that?
It's funny you ask that because I don't think anyone has really asked me that before. And I remember feeling really overwhelmed. My brother came to visit me in Kenya, which was wonderful. But I remember feeling this deep sense of I don't fit in anymore. And I had changed in all of these ways. I had experienced so much rich culture and memories and opportunities to travel beyond Kenya that I got back and I was 25 and all my friends were getting married and starting their families and they're like, "Oh, we're so glad to have you back." And to them it was like I had just jumped right back into normal life, but
Hmm.
I had changed. And I remember feeling like it was really difficult to explain to people how I had changed and the impact that that year had had on me. And so I worked downtown for a year in DC. And right around the time of sort of the market crash of 2010 and trying to find a job, I took a job that I could find. And then my dream job actually kind of came into my life several months later. And that sparked in me this whole 4-year period of working with foreign embassies in Washington at an organization that connected companies with the foreign diplomats and countries where they were trying to do business. So my life was very sweet because during that time, I had so many connections to other countries, conversations at the South African embassy, dinners at this embassy. And it really kept me rooted in this feeling of like I'm a part of something bigger.
Mm, yeah. Mm. So like what did that look like then in your it sounds like you like this dream job landed at like the perfect time based off of like just having that experience, but what did you come into friction in your relationships at that time after having this experience that you felt was different than the other people around you at that time? Like was it harder to connect with people?
It was harder to connect with people. I wouldn't say there was friction. I would say it felt like I was that I had lived like a different life that no one saw. And so it made me feel like a little bit of an outlier. I was
Mm-hmm.
I was living in a small, my small town where I'd grown up. A lot of people's lives were still there. Um, everyone hung out at the same places, the same church, the same community, the same activities. And it was hard to relate to people because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. And so, I wouldn't say there was friction, but I definitely felt lonely at times
Yeah.
and maybe a general sense of like, do I really fit in here anymore?
Mm.
So
How come?
I didn't fit in there because I didn't fit in there.
But like what about like did you feel like you couldn't they weren't connecting with you on a certain level? Is that what you felt?
I
Or
felt
like
like some people, and maybe this gets into both local impact and local community and global impact and global community are equally important.
mhm,
We're living in a time right now where there has never been a more critical moment in our country's history of really deciding who we're going to be for the next 50 years.
mhm,
And that starts with local engagement, local community, connecting, not being divisive over politics, but really deciding how local impact is going to change us, help us, and really loving your neighbor. Why do I say all of this? Well, at that point in my life, I maybe felt like investing in global impact or changing the world globally
Hmm.
felt more noble than
Mm,
maybe investing in your local town or neighborhood. I think differently now, but 25-year-old, there was a part of me that probably had a little bit of arrogance that thought,
mhm,
going over to other parts of the country and the other parts of the world is more noble and impactful than
mm,
just
yeah.
volunteering at your, you know, local blood drive. And I think at the time, some of my community and friends were content to
Hmm.
live this little life. And
Hmm.
I wanted this,
Yeah.
and they wanted this. And there's no right or wrong. It's just we wanted different things.
Mm, like, yeah, it sounds like ambition.
Curiosity, maybe, ambition, curiosity, exploration,
Hmm.
just maybe a healthy discontent of I want more for my life.
Yeah. Did you have a specific experience that opened your mind to now being able to realize like, okay, maybe at that point like I was a little bit uh or at that point I was more so, I guess what I'm trying to say is, did you have an experience that allowed you to realize that it's a good thing to just be able to serve in the place that you are instead of needing to go somewhere else?
Yes, absolutely. Um, so a couple experiences would be throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to work with local nonprofits
Hmm.
through the companies that I've worked for, and serving my local neighbor, serving in a local capacity through the companies that I've worked for, whether we did, National Day of Service or volunteering days, or I'm thinking specifically when I was really helping support the veterans community. I
Hmm.
realized that it is so fun and so important to serve those who are right next to you.
Hmm.
And through those experiences of serving with my colleagues, it really deepened, you know, the bonds and the sort of the layers of our community at work um, that really just were amazing, and they were really
Mm,
fun. And I think that really kind of helped me rethink the way that I was operating. I also think COVID did this. Like,
mhm,
there was a sense in which during the early year, like the early early years of COVID, the early months of COVID, yeah, I mean, it was my grandmother was her health was declining. Um, I went and played piano at her local senior living home a couple times, several months before she passed away, and I just remember thinking, like, what a joy this is to serve in a capacity that's like connected to my grandmother and
mhm,
my local town and my neighborhood where I grew up.
mm. Yeah.
Um, and I think sometimes what I'm really getting at is it's not really about where you are, it's just about showing up.
Mm,
Show up
yeah.
in your life, show up wherever you are. Um, just show up. Show
Mm,
up in the spaces that you live, show up in your dog park, show up at work, show up when you go into a coffee shop, say hi to someone. Um, so much of life is just in the mundane. And I think we think like community service means, okay, well, I have to have this like purposeful plan around my volunteer work, and I have to do it on these Monday nights, and I have to be committed for 5 years. And right. But it's not really like that. I think
mm,
most of life is, let me take a meal to this friend, let me help this person, let me um help this woman on the side of the street, she needs help with her groceries. Like, I think service can be infused into your daily life, and that's what I try to do now.
yeah, yeah, and like not just doing it when it's like convenient for you, like on those Monday nights, but like
Exactly.
always being like open to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so you mentioned church earlier. At what point in your life did you start to develop a deeper relationship with God?
I so appreciate this question because the way you phrased it really is a journey, right? It's a process. And I think we all have a very personal relationship with God that each of us could say has looked different over different years. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up going to church. I grew up listening to my parents and my grandparents pray over me, at bedtime, pray over me during the day, give me opportunities to learn and grow. And throughout my high school years, several things happened that I think really hit home for me in terms of big questions. So,
Mhm.
why does God exist? If God is a good God, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen in the world? Um, why is it so difficult to have faith sometimes? What is faith? What is the afterlife? Why is there a battle between good and evil, heaven and hell? Like, what does that actually mean? So all these questions, because in high school, in ninth grade, my grandmother died from cancer. In 10th grade, two girls from our school were on their way to school and hit a tree and died instantly. We also had in the D.C. area, there was the sniper incident where there was a sniper shooter that was driving around all parts of the DMV shooting people. And then 9/11 happened. And so, and then in my senior year, I tore my ACL playing soccer right before like my big senior year of sports. And so throughout my high school years, all of these things kept happening, right? And every time something happened, I had a choice. And that choice was, do I grow more cynical and resentful and bitter and distrusting and doubting of the possibility that there is a God who looks over us, who created us, who designed us for purpose, who gave us life, who loved us to life and death, and who also is watching out for each of us and empathizes and sympathizes with our suffering in a way that no one else can. And every time I was confronted with one of these life incidents, by the grace of God, I feel like I just kept maybe being like a, you know, a pot of clay in a potter's hands. And I just kept, just being moldable and shapeable and softening my heart and saying, okay, God, like, I believe, help me in my unbelief. And that is honestly the simplest prayer anybody has ever prayed in scripture is, I believe, help my unbelief. And I think that as I took small steps of faith toward like moving towards God in those years instead of away from God, I felt like I just kept being shown a little bit more sunshine, a little bit more light, a little bit more um peeking through the door of like the glory of God and God's light and God's goodness, and just kept like inching towards a deeper awareness of what we would call the spirit of God in you. And the beauty of all of it is that over the years, I've definitely had my highs and lows and my ups and downs, good choices, bad choices, moments of surrender, moments of rebellion. And I think that through it all, I just feel really held by unconditional love. And so, yeah, my journey is not necessarily one of like one big moment, um, no big light bulb moment, but little light bulbs, right? And maybe a little bit of thunder along the way that just said like, yeah, I see you and I love you and you can trust me and I'm with you. Yeah. So that's been my journey. Yeah.
It's so cool to hear too how how it has been gradual in that way, and how you come from a family that raised you having or raised you believing in God, and that like your faith was almost tested along the way in each of these in each of those moments up until now.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back because I think maybe when I was a child, I had a very simple faith. Um, it's kind of like when a mom says to her child, please don't touch the hot stove.
Mhm.
And there's always the children that are like, okay, mom, I won't touch the stove. That was me as a child. And then there's the children that are like, well, I'll just like slightly touch it, right? And it's still the same heat. It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter whether you slightly touch it or all the way touch it. There's just this curiosity of like, well, what would happen if I touched it?
Mhm.
And that, as we know, is the story of Eden, which
Yeah.
is um, connected to my book, which is like Eve ate the apple and she goes, what would happen if I ate it? Right.
Mhm.
And I think maybe in my youth, I had a very simple trust and faith. And it's actually been more in my later years, in my 30s, that I've felt like um, maybe I've challenged God, not always in a
Mhm.
good way, but just tested and um, been a little bit more tempted towards like, I'm just going to do it my way.
Yeah.
And that it has not always produced the best results. So
Yeah. But it has produced good results.
good results and some not so good results.
Yeah.
Where we have to learn, okay, this is now a time of discernment and this is no longer a good decision. Um, just things in my life that I feel like I've had to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm. Thank you for sharing that.
you're welcome.
Yeah. I yeah, it's always interesting to hear how different people have grown in their relationship with God. And
Yeah,
I find that that's really the best way to really understand who someone is, and like what yeah, understand who somebody is and how they are and why they are the way they are. And so yeah, thank you for sharing that.
you're welcome. And I think it gives a window, to anyone listening, just that there's no shame in doubting and questioning. And even the most strong, confident people in history have wrestled with God.
Mm,
And I have a deeper empathy now, having now wrestled with God and really doubted and questioned over the last several years, sometimes like God's purpose for my life or my own purpose.
yeah.
I just think that as I've questioned and doubted and wrestled, it's really helped me understand people that do question their faith, and also people that want to believe but don't know how,
Hmm.
or don't know what to do about it, or don't know what the next step is, or just are looking for a simple solution or simple answer, and being able to sit with them and sit with that and say, yeah, it is really complex and
Mm,
it's simple, but it's also incredibly complex. Like there's never a one size fits all journey to how you cultivate the dialogue with God.
yeah.
And that's a very personal thing. And so I really hope that, for anyone listening today that's like, oh man, I want to believe, like I want to have a dialogue and an open door with God, but I just don't know how. It's it's like one small mustard seed of faith. Like every day you just slightly knock on the door and pretty soon, the door's going to open and you're going to be in a position where you're like, "Oh, I get it now.
Mm, yeah.
I get it."
Mm. What you mentioned his purpose for your life. What do you think is his purpose for your life?
You asked some really deep questions on this podcast. I love it. what is God's purpose for my life? Still figuring that out. I would say the simple answer is to every day to love and be loved, to love others with the unconditional love of God and to extend that love to everybody around me. I think that's like a simple purpose that I can anchor myself on every day. Um, my broader purpose, I am in the process of thinking about my second book and thinking about what I would want that to be. I have some ideas around what I would like for it to be.
Hmm.
And I'm also of the mindset that my life purpose is to build a women's leadership academy in Kenya. And I have always wanted to be a mother. I've always wanted to have a family. But I also feel like I'm a mother to many women and girls in my
Hmm.
life. And I just have a deep longing to support women in their faith, their profession, their career, their growth, their womanhood. And that is both here in the States and in Kenya. So, yeah, just really excited about the next chapter of my life. Like, I'm not 40 yet, but I'm 38. I'll be 39 this year. And I just kind of was thinking the other day about my 40s and how I really want that chapter in that decade of my life to just be super impactful, living part-time back in Kenya, being there, for a month out of each year and really emphasizing setting myself up for success so that I can have both my business and my income, but then also get to help and spend time with other people.
Awesome.
Yeah,
What
and
is
Sadie will come with me too.
what is the what's the call to Kenya?
It's just my heart and my home. I mean, I
Mm.
lived there for a year, so there's a nonprofit that I partner with, a plug here for She Saves a Nation. We provide holistic support to women and girls in Kenya across health, career, spiritual education. And what we do is we help equip young girls to pursue their dreams and to pursue their purpose. And we would like to build a women's leadership academy in in an area of Kenya that's slightly outside of the city, and we have a plot of land that we're looking at purchasing to build this academy.
Mm.
And we're just really excited about some long-term programming and scholarships and education that we'll be able to provide to these girls.
Wow,
Yeah,
so cool.
yeah.
What is the sort of like timeline that you're hoping to I guess start digging over there?
Well, we need a lot of money. So right now we're working on fundraising and there's several phases to the project, but we'll need the construction first and the land, and then we'll be able to start building and renovating this school that we have on the property. What we really would like to do is encourage people to give and donate their time and come and see the space with us in 2025 and help us um, pursue grants, funding, individual donations, multi-year donations, and really building this as a long-term program.
Mm.
So yeah, we're sitting in the seat of like show me the money.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so would this be like a school or would this be like a program that's outside of school or
It would
what
be
would
a
that
full
look
a
like?
full-time school and house, so like a boarding school, and we would provide regenerative agriculture opportunities for the girls to build their own gardens and plots
Mm.
of vegetables and fruits, and the ability for them to be self-sustaining.
Wow, that's awesome. That sounds really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, it will be fun. It's a long-term dream and one day at a time.
Yeah. Are there any direct flights to Kenya from Austin?
That is a great question. Let me pull out my phone and no, I don't know. I think there is one from Houston to Nairobi. that I've taken before.
Yeah. So then, do you see yourself? So do you see yourself splitting time between like Austin and Kenya?
Um, I would like to be in Kenya once a year for like, 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. Usually we go in December or January when the weather's really good, and yeah, it's always fun to go then.
Yeah.
So
How did you get involved with this organization? What's the name of it?
She Saves a Nation. My dear friend Kanita started it, and I joined the board, and then we started doing trips there. I went a couple years ago, and since then we've just continued our programming support and funding here in the States, and we have partnered with them, the group that we partner with in Kenya, for several years. So it's a journey. Kanita and I met, and I got excited about her vision and her organization, and
Mhm.
yeah, we've just really had a fun time.
Mm. What about her vision was so easy to get behind?
Just the integrated, holistic support that we would want to provide to the girls. When we think about changing someone's trajectory in life, it's not just a matter of providing them with daily sustenance like food and shelter and water and clean water. It's a lot of times these girls have gone through trauma, they've
Mm.
gone through mental health issues, they've been dealing with really just tragic circumstances in their family's life, living in poor conditions. And so we look at it holistically, which is why I think it's such a beautiful vision, because we don't want to just touch a girl's life from a physical standpoint, like, hey, here's your rice and beans for the week. But it's also saying, what has impacted you to date? How can we help you heal from that? What's the trauma that you've experienced? And how can we, just catalyze you to move forward into all of your dreams?
So really being with them like every step of the way.
Yeah, in all universal aspects. I mean, I think wholeness and healing is really important. Some of these girls have been abused. Some of these girls have gotten pregnant really young. Some of these girls have gone through serious emotional abuse. So
Mm.
I think that there's opportunities there to really step back and say, like, how do we create a sustained model of healing that is really purposeful in all of the areas of one's life?
Wow. So did you know her when you went to Kenya the first time?
No, no. We met
Wow.
many years later.
And so this was just something that she was already planning to do in Kenya.
Yeah. Hmm.
Wow. It sounds like your circles or your story is really coming full circle then in that way.
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, do you have I do you have any questions for me? I just asked you a bunch of questions, but I also want to give you the opportunity to ask me a question
Yeah.
if you want.
No, I would just love to, I wrote A Wilder Eden, How to Keep Dreaming in a World of Disappointments. It's a book that is all about purpose and dreams, and I love the journey you're on of this podcast, and really digging into people's purpose and
Mhm.
really exploring what it is that motivates people and drives them and gets them out of bed every morning. Um, and like my book was really designed to help spark people's dreams,
Mhm.
um, big dreams, right? Like the dreams that you don't always even vocalize because you are scared to say it. And when you have been interviewing people, I'm sure you've come across so many amazing stories of
Mhm.
just people's purpose and their vision for their life and their big dreams. So I'm sure that's been really fulfilling for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get to I feel privileged to be like in the front seat to be able to listen to people and one to yes, it's cool to like give them a platform to be able to share their story, but also like selfishly to be able to like sit here and just learn from all these people and to
Mhm.
learn how people find, yeah, purpose in their work and a direction forward. And yeah, I think something that I've kind of taken away just from like doing this for whatever, I think for like 40 something episodes now, is that I think in the Western society we have like a misconception of what it means to be purposeful. I
Mhm.
think people think purpose and they're like, oh, like I'm a business person, I'm working this many hours, I'm making this much money. And I think purpose is a lot deeper than that. And I would argue that we almost need to know who we are in Christ to be able to find what our purpose is. Because
Right.
how can we live a purposeful life if it's not connected to everything else in the world of what's going on, and it's not coming from a
Mhm.
place of also serving.
Right.
So yeah, and then also the other part too, like there's so many, I've interviewed people that are artists or people that are doing marketing like yourself or authors or just all different things, and
Mhm.
people find purpose and meaning in their experience in completely unique ways based off of who once again who they are. And so that's been really interesting to see, and at the same time given me more faith in knowing that what I am doing outside
Mhm.
of uh, just this podcast doesn't need to go with the grain. Like I grew up in a very like I didn't grow up uh, I didn't grow up religious whatsoever, but I grew up with like the expectation of okay, you go to school, you go to college, you go to grad school, and then like you get a steady job with benefits, and like that's how you live your life. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's also for me at least I felt like there was more that I needed to do outside of that. And so yeah, I would say that those were some of my
Yeah, I
points.
think that's a really important point because there is no perfect sequence. It my life has I thought I was going to get married when I was, 26,
Yeah.
27, and I'm 38. And I have been so blessed in my life to have had so many amazing experiences and things that have given me opportunities. I don't know that I would have been able to do those things had I been raising a newborn or a toddler. I
Yeah.
want those things, but I also look at what I've done and who I've been able to become and who I've been able to learn from. And I'm so grateful that my timeline has been totally what it needed to be.
Yeah.
And that is faith in itself, because I think
Mhm.
I was just talking to a friend today about like the grass is always greener. And I think we are so tempted in our culture to catch up with people and to feel like, okay, I'm ahead or I'm behind, or, I need to be this or I should be here. But that's not really the life of faith. The
Yeah.
life of faith is not a series of steps or chapters of your life where, you get to predict and you get to peek ahead and see like, okay, this is the next chapter. And then after that, there's this chapter. Well, no, like the life of faith is lived one day at a time.
Yeah.
And usually it involves not knowing what the future holds.
Mm.
So I just think it's really important that we all look at what our journey has been to date and say,
Mhm.
you know
Yeah.
what? Like, I am so glad that this has been the chapters of my life. Like, you
Mm.
can't pick a different book. It's your
Yeah.
life and it's
Yeah.
your book. And so, yeah, it takes a lot of courage to just stay the course, stay in your lane and say, I don't need to compare myself to anybody else.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I'd add to that too is the fruit is almost sweeter the more we lean into that.
Yep.
And because like things in our life happen regardless of if we want it to or not. But
Right.
it's like you said, and going back to what you said earlier, we have a choice in how we react to the situation. And
Right.
am I going to put my faith into believing that there's something that there is better for me out there, or am I going to be bitter and resentful, and am I going to live the rest of my life like that? And it's not that like these things shouldn't happen, right? It's like, of course, I wouldn't wish that. For instance, like my dad passed away when I was young. Like I wouldn't wish that that happens to somebody, but
Right.
I th- we have to be also objective with, like, look, this has happened, and like I hope that there's something out there that's better for me. And granted
Right.
that someone is taking action each day and and looking for it, but I think I would say I know that the fruit is
Mm,
sweeter the more
yeah,
that we lean into that.
it is. It is. And having a little bit of faith, and as you know, the world says, trust the process. But I mean, there couldn't be a better way of saying, um, sit back, relax. Like sometimes you just got to trust that
Yeah,
whatever God has for you, whatever's coming up, is the best that is for you.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
it's a journey. It's a journey.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, like one of the things that I learned through that was also the like we don't have to do this alone. And like the power of community in this, and like when we're going through a shitty time to be able to lean on somebody else,
Right.
and to be able to be reassured that whatever is
Mm,
happening it'll work out. And there's
100%.
definitely like a nuance to that too, right? Like we don't want to be like Job's friends in the Old Testament of like telling him like how dare he have these feelings, and how dare he feel the way that he does when he like lost his whole family and everything was taken away from him. But to like really be present with somebody and to be with them, and yeah, to be present with how they feel regardless of what they're saying.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's all. Anyway, all right, we're coming on 4, so I guess we can wrap up here. But thank you so much for coming
Oh,
on
it's a
the
pleasure.
podcast.
Thank you,
And
Jason, for hosting me
yeah,
today. And we're so grateful to be on your podcast and excited for you and all the good things coming your way.
thank you. Likewise.